Feeling the presence of two people behind her, Carrera was not surprised. As relaxed as always, she asked over her shoulder. What do you intend to do? If you fulfill your role, you can stay in a safe place, you know. Hahaha, I want to look cool too. Besides, if I'm going to lure that guy, being here is more certain. Ha, now that is the man my lord recognized. Carrera had predicted this would happen from the start. Since she would be completely defenseless, she intended, at worst, for someone to handle things for her. Understanding that, Yuki smiled wryly. He had been played, but he didn't feel bad about it. He was impressed by her calculation, but it was also proof of her trust in them. Yuki felt his spirits lift slightly at receiving trust from someone who wasn't an ally, someone who was, in fact, on the enemy side. Alright then, let's get started. Saying that, Yuki began his move. If push comes to shove, I will evacuate both of you with my teleportation. Mai had also steeled herself. She simply thought practically. She just needed to concentrate on running away. Thus, the final operation against Habataki began. In the sky from which Yuki and Mai had departed, the remaining members looked at each other. Those present were flying by some means or another. Since hiding on the ground was no longer safer, they maintained their standby positions. If the boss has resolved to die, it seems we have no choice but to go along with it. Yeah. If we fail, that's just how it goes. Clayman and Footman might laugh at us in the afterlife, but let's make sure we leave no regrets. Lapis, you say really good things sometimes. Don't say that, Tyr. Aren't I always the quote man? Joking as usual, he lightened the atmosphere. Everyone felt saved by Lapis's attitude. Sylvia muttered earnestly. You really haven't changed, huh? Well, yeah. This made Lapis awkward. Since he had only regained his memories recently, he couldn't boldly say, I haven't changed. But denying it would be strange too. Don't try to get a head start this time. If we die together. Understood. Alright. Then, I will distract that guy. Sylvia announced with a smile. Toying with him at Godspeed. In that case, let's go with something safer. Saying that, Omija joined the conversation. Then, a simple strategy meeting was held via thought communication. If hit by Habataki's flash, it's over. Since dodging it seems difficult even at Godspeed, preventing him from firing it is best. However, things wouldn't go that smoothly. But Omija judged that if it was just buying time for Carrera to get ready, they could manage it on their own. It seems that guy is using not just vision, but also magic sense. But, he doesn't seem used to combat yet. I think there's an opening we can exploit there. Omija's plan was this. She and Sylvia would keep their distance and release their battle or attack alternately. That way, Habataki would likely react to it. If they timed it well, couldn't they confuse him? Hide your battle aura like this. That way, won't he misunderstand and think the opponent has teleported? Because she could do it, she assumed the opponent might think it possible too. That possibility seemed high enough. However, objections naturally arose. Is that safe? Since we're visible, wouldn't we just get killed individually? That's right. He seems to have vision too, wouldn't we get caught? Normally, grasping information via vision is slower than magic sense. That was the basis of Omija's opinion, but it could also be wishful thinking. If Habataki's eyesight was something extraordinary derived from an authority, they might be easily spotted, and the plan would fail. Lapis's point was out of concern for that. Kigali, who had been silent until now, finally opened her mouth here. In that case, I shall conceal all of your existence information with my ultimate enchantment Book of Prophecy, Agastia. As soon as she said it, Kigali exercised her authority. The authority of the ultimate enchantment Book of Prophecy, Agastia governed phenomena related to information. While predicting the near future a few seconds ahead was basic, its applications included deception and camouflage. Although she couldn't rewrite the information of the target itself, she could temporarily make them believe something else. It could be used like an enhanced version of hypnosis, but since it would be resisted by those with strong wills, it was useless against them. However, if there was permission, it was a different story. As a result of Kigali exercising her authority, Sylvia and Omija's figures vanished. No, they appeared to vanish. Amazing. Unless I use my authority, I can't see L-Chan's figure right now. It's true. The two were impressed. Naturally, the others had similar reactions. Then, I'll use my authority too. This time Tyr activated the ultimate enchantment Musician of Paradise. Until now, it only affected me, but it seems I can grant it to others too. The meaning of Tyr's words was understood by the two recipients as a tangible sensation. Wow. I feel like my power has increased surprisingly. But this seems to drain stamina incredibly fast, so using it in actual combat will likely require a knack. Compared to Sylvia, who was surprised and delighted by the enhancement, Omija's analysis was precise. In fact, while combat ability skyrocketed several times over, endurance dropped not just by several times but significantly more. Since it consumed more energy than fighting at full power, it was a natural consequence. "Will you be okay?" Lapis asked worriedly. To this, the wife and daughter were nonchalant. "If we were actually fighting, it would be a hindrance, but if it's just to create a presence for diversion, it's convenient." They answered with laughs, as if to say there was no problem. Thus, the diversion operation began simultaneously. Meanwhile, Carrera's preparations were steadily progressing. Holding the blade transformed Carrera in a side stance, Carrera heightened her battle aura. Even so, there was silence. The expression didn't fit the situation, but Carrera's state, with her eyes half closed, was truly quiet and calm. The tension had left her shoulders. In fact, her entire body seemed relaxed. All of her spirit was concentrated on a single point: the golden blade. In the silent atmosphere, only the heartbeats of Yuki and Mai played a rhythm. Carrera was grasping the war situation with her entire body. She was listening to the thought communication shared by the allied faction, and had grasped everyone's movements. Amidst that, she took note of Tyr's statement. An authority that instantly increases combat ability. That was exactly what Carrera was seeking. "That's interesting. Cast that authority on me too." Carrera called out to Tyr without hesitation. "But, this is..." "Oh, don't worry about the aftermath. It's fine as long as I definitely defeat him." Tyr sounded anxious, but Carrera was unconcerned. Believing only in her victory, she staked everything on increasing her winning percentage. Tyr relented and followed Carrera's words. Thus, preparations were complete. "I leave it to you, Yuki Kagurazaka. I'm honored you remembered my name." Yuki was also fully prepared. He could execute the plan anytime upon Carrera's signal. "Do it." "Okay." At that moment, Habataki, who had been toyed with by Sylvia and Omija, vanished from that spot. At the same time, he appeared exactly where Carrera had designated. Yuki synchronized his consciousness with Carrera and responded to her request without a millimeter of error, making Habataki appear right in front of her just as she desired. The method was the same as when they focused fire on Habataki earlier. If he had used it frequently, Habataki might have devised a countermeasure, but fortunately, Habataki was unguarded. It was the arrogance of the strong. Additionally, Habataki was currently busy chasing Omija and the others, and the blood had rushed to his head. That also helped, and he was easily caught by Yuki's technique. Even before that, it should have worked this time regardless. Because Yuki had performed the calculations with death-defying effort. There was no way it wouldn't succeed. Yuki's resolve was correctly conveyed to Carrera. Just as I expected. It was heartfelt praise, even if she didn't voice it. And Carrera would not waste that opportunity. "Ring," the clear tone resonated amidst the silence. The swung golden blade. That was the pinnacle of swordsmanship. The ideal destination of the Boro style that Ajera had dreamed of but never achieved. That was secret technique, Ninami. The secret essence of the sword, finally reaching completion by Carrera inheriting all of Ajera's experience and knowledge. That was one-hit kill. It was the ultimate secret technique that ended everything with the first strike of a preemptive attack, sharing the philosophy of the Gaijin Ryu's no second sword needed. The reason Ajera never mastered this technique was clear. He was always thinking about what to do if it were blocked. Especially on a battlefield, enemies are not limited to one. Rather, techniques were polished assuming one against many, so doing something like betting everything on a single strike was strictly forbidden. Because his purpose and direction were the exact opposite, the ideal secret technique had remained a dream. However, Carrera was different. She challenged it with full power, discarding all other distracting thoughts. "If I fall, my companions will manage the rest." There was a slight feeling of that, but fundamentally, the thought, as long as I can kill the enemy in front of me, that's fine. A very Carrera-like philosophy lay at the root. Therefore, the secret technique Ninami reached completion. And the result, the power of the technique, was told by Habataki, who had been split right in half from the crown of his head. His core was cleanly severed in two, and he had ascended without understanding what had happened. "Good gracious, that was splendid, Lady Carrera. It's too much of a pain to even answer." To Ajera, who released the blade transformation and spoke words of praise, Carrera cursed while falling onto her back and looking up at the sky. "I leave the rest to you." Saying that, Carrera fainted. Having exhausted everything, she entered a dormant state. "Understood." Responding, Ajera lifted his sleeping master's body. Tears were overflowing from his twin eyes like waterfalls. Ajera was moved from the bottom of his heart, seeing the realization of his dream. "And one more person. Splendid. So that is the destination of the sword," muttered King Gazel involuntarily. He had been watching from the sky, ready to provide support if anything happened. Gazel was also moved. Witnessing the destination of the Boro style became a lifelong treasure for Gazel. That excitement made Gazelle stronger. Men, the situation still does not permit negligence. Brace yourselves. Shouting encouragement to his subordinates, he began attacking with full force to cover Carrera and the others, so they could return to the safety zone. Finally, 2 more people. We absolutely can't imitate that, right? It is impossible for me. Right? This is the dead center of a battlefield. Normally, you think about the next enemy and save some strength. Nodding to each other were Misery and Rain. Seeing Carrera's outrageous deed, they had no choice but to admit it was an act they could not imitate. That is how abnormal Carrera is. There is a phrase without thinking of the consequences, but normally, one thinks about them a little. If a doubt like what if had arisen, the sword tip would have dulled, and enemy would have ended in failure. Therefore, that secret technique was an illusory skill, and the probability of its realization was equal to nearly 0. Moreover, this was the dead center of a battlefield. Even considering time and place, one had to say it was the worst moment. Despite that, Carrera accomplished it. The 2 were unsure whether they should be surprised or offer praise. As expected, Carrera is broken in the head, Rain muttered earnestly. Misery deeply agreed. Same here. Let's just be glad she isn't an enemy. Nodding deeply to each other, the 2 thought, that's just like Carrera. And, relieved that she was currently an ally, they swore deeply in their hearts to try not to oppose her in the future.